Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 22 of the Observe and Rapport Show. I'm Kyle Brennan, joined as ever by my beautiful co-host, Keith Sullivan. Keith, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. We're doing good, and it's weird because it's an election year, and like, why are we doing good? It's isn't that weird?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, where's the riots and where's the autonomous?
There's plenty of riots going on right now.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, is that the best we got? Is these little soft ass college
You're not
kids?
satisfied?
Like, you know, I heard it was comical because back in the day when people would protest something, they would usually go on what was called a hunger strike, if you remember.
Yeah.
Gandhi did that, right? They refused to eat. These kids are asking about the meal plan.
Yeah.
Like and it's got to be vegan.
Yep.
Like, it's like,
Yeah.
is this the best we got? Like, this is like the election year. Where's the autonomous zones? Where's the looting? Where's the statues falling down? I know some people lit themselves on fire, and that's fun, but like, it's not, that only happened, twice? Like,
Yeah.
where's the real election year? You know,
You expect more from our Ivy League
well, it's like
college
after
students.
2020. I mean, it's like I expected a little. Where's the construction zones with the bricks all over the streets where they happen to be
Where's
having
the
riots?
pizzazz?
Yeah,
you know?
well, George Carlin has a line. He said, if you're born in this world, you get a ticket to the freak show, and if you're born in America, you get a front row seat.
Yeah.
And we're sitting front row, and I just don't see anything happening. I don't.
There's no shortage of shit that you can see on the average day and just be like, what?
Yeah, and
What's
like I
going
said,
on?
like it's good with the. It's immolation's always a big deal. Good for you. But like, you know what it is in America? That smells. It's too much lighting yourself on fire. It's too much. Like,
Immolation? That's what that is?
self-immolation
I was
means
gonna
lighting
ask
yourself
you.
on fire. You don't watch these things. I know.
That's not a word I use every day.
Well, Rage Against the Machine's album with the guy with the monk on fire on the front cover. That's where I learned that word from initially.
Right. You know what's funny? Listening to Rage Against the Machine all these years, I love their music.
So good, dude.
I have no idea what their message is, but I know it's like very political. I've never listened to a word of like the lyrics or anything.
Oh, pal,
I
they're
know.
highly, highly political.
I know.
It's
very
Rage Against the Machine.
I know.
You know, but yeah, so that's a little disappointing. So I guess we're doing good. You know, it's kind of, but that is bizarre. I was expecting a little more out of the whatever they are, the other people who want it to be a certain way. You know,
Yeah.
whoever fuels these things.
It's funny. When I was in college, I don't remember any protests happening.
Well, I put out a TikTok about this because it's like, don't you guys have day drinking to get done? Aren't there brunches? Aren't there hazings even to get to? Like,
Do you know,
You know?
do you know Professor Scott Galloway? He's like kind of this public figure. He's on podcasts. He goes on talk shows and stuff.
not really. You know?
He's an NYU professor. I don't know what his subject is, but he kind of covers like technology and marketing. But he's a very good writer. He has like a Medium Substack, and like it just came out with.
Where's
his book.
he teach?
NYU.
Oh, okay.
But he's very good to listen to, and he was on I think Piers Morgan, and he said like protesting for these kids is the new sex.
Yeah,
Basically.
it's the new heightened
Yeah, and he
emotional thing.
I won't be able to do it justice because I watched it pretty quickly, but it was like a 10-minute segment on CNN where he had a really good take on it. How just like kids are now, this is like their dopamine fix. It's like they get this heightened rush from feeling some sense of like, you know, standing up for the oppressed in some way.
You know, by the way, look, I joke, but the reality is that, you know, however you feel about the conflict, you know, people dying is bad, right? People dying is bad. Everyone knows that, right? And it is nice that the young people of this world, and yeah, maybe they're soft compared, that's what every generation who's older thinks of the younger kids. But the reality is that they're in college, and if we're going to go with the old school way of thinking about it, they're the greatest minds right now. They're in Ivy League schools, and if they seem to give a shit about, you know, ethnic cleansing and genocidal tendencies and all that. That's a good name for a band. But yeah, a band I would listen to. Yeah. So, but
you could make a whole list of good band names.
Dude,
from.
I knew a band called Ape Shit once that was so good. But anyway, look, realistically, look, the death toll, it's horrible, right? Like, and I don't want to get into the whole thing today. It's just that when you compare and reference, the amount of children who have died in 6 months in Gaza compared to the amount of children who were killed in Ukraine in 2 years, it's literally like, I think it's like 60 times the amount almost of children if you compare. Wow. And like, so that makes you think, right? That makes you go, hold on a second. I mean, and look, this is important shit, joking aside. So, Godspeed, college kids. I don't know.
Yeah. You got to give the college kids a little bit of grace because, when we were 18, 19, we weren't the most informed and, people on the planet. So I don't give them a ton of flack. Yes, of course, they go to the Ivy League schools, so you expect them to be a certain echelon of brilliant. But again, they're 19 years old. It's more so the faculty and the the infiltrators who are igniting all of this and encouraging it. Yeah. That makes
that's what I mean. Where's the CIA dropping off the bricks? And where's all that stuff? Like, where's the good? Like, where's the real riot?
What are those called? Agent provocateurs?
Yeah. Like, you can't just let the kids... You got to send people in there to make the news. And they made the news, but it's not... Look, we're spoiled now. I'm very bored as an audience member of the show. I'm very bored. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that ties very well into the book that I'm reading.
Okay.
Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. I heard it referenced on a few podcasts. Tristan Harris, the social media guy, he quoted it on Joe Rogan. I've heard Neil Brennan talk about it, Tim Dillon, but it goes exactly to what you just said, which is that it's a really cool treatise on how different forms of media have influenced culture and how information is passed. So it starts with print media and like the written word. Yeah. Or actually starts with like the oratory word, how like before the printing press, everything was speeches. Then the printing press, then the telegraph, and now television is the main form. And how the medium is the message. Did you ever read that book?
Medium is the message? No.
Oh, I think, we might have talked about it.
We did definitely talk about it.
But anyway, how television now is pretty much meant for entertainment purposes. Which is what you're talking about. You're like, as an audience member, I want
like
more.
I'm joking,
right?
But like it's not a joke. Yeah.
And it's really cool how he ties how culture and information was passed in each period and how now it's... And this book was written in 1985 about televisions and how they were taking over America. But you could literally replace the word television with like social media or
smartphone,
mainstream media, smartphone, etc., and it still holds up. So he talks about one interesting thing was in like the 1800s, whenever Abraham Lincoln was alive, before he ran for president, before he ran for Senate, he and Stephen Douglas had 3.5-hour debates that the public would just come and see. And Abraham Lincoln would talk for an hour, then Stephen Douglas would rebut, or Abraham Lincoln would talk for an hour and a half, Stephen Douglas would rebut for an hour, and then Abraham Lincoln would rebut that for 30 minutes. And the audience was fully listening. Yeah. Like, obviously not a phone in sight. There was no written papers or anything to read, so they had to pay attention. Right. And he shows these quotes from Abraham Lincoln, and you're like, they're very difficult sentences with a lot of nuance and like a lot of apostrophes and articulation. And he's like, he talked like that for an hour and a half, and the public knew what he was saying, right, and could listen and were fully entertained that entire time.
Didn't the author of this book describe that era as the golden age of logic and reason? Was that the same thing?
I don't know if he uses that quote, but
that was when it was the height of like the spoken word, the written word. Like where did maybe I was Googling the book because I saw you posted about it, and somebody had said that at the time a president could walk down the street and they wouldn't be recognized.
Yeah, exactly.
But they are, if you showed the average citizen a letter written by each president, they would be able to see who wrote which one, or they would be able to tell you who wrote which one.
That's what it is.
So at the time, that was what people associated with.
Yeah, and more weight was given to someone's oratory intellect and their written words than how they
face.
looked. Yeah.
Yeah.
They think about presidents back then. I don't know the names of them, unfortunately, but like some of them were like 300 pounds, ugly.
Yeah.
And the author actually says
Dan Buren.
He said,
God, that guy.
Abraham, there's not a single picture of Abraham Lincoln smiling. His wife was basically a psychopath, and Lincoln himself had serious bouts of depression. He goes, do you think that guy would have been elected in the modern age of where the image is most important?
Right.
And what he goes through how the written word and books were kind of like the height, basically, because books are meant to last, right? That information is meant to exist as a timestamp and be something that people regard with citations and everything for hundreds of thousands of years. And the book is like the most important thing. And this country was founded on the written word. All of our laws, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, like everything was enacted through black squiggly lines on a piece of paper. And that was given the most weight. And then when the telegraph and the newspaper came along, you could now transmit information across state lines. So someone in Maine could know that someone in Texas had the whooping cough, for example.
Right.
So now it wasn't about the substance of the information. It was about how quickly can you get that information across and make it appealing. And then the photograph made that even more important. How quickly can you get an appealing image, tie it with an appealing sentence, and get it off to the next person? Now television, it's all about how do you create an image and an aura and a charisma with music and flashy images and a handsome guy with nice hair and a good smile, and how do you make that more presentable? So it's
talking haircuts.
Yes, he uses that phrase. But so it's no longer about the information, a story or an idea. It's about how you present it and how it comes off. And one of my favorite examples is he says, what if, as you're reading this book, in the middle of it, I said, now let me just pause to say a few nice words about United Airlines and Chase Manhattan Bank. You'd be like, what the fuck is this guy? Like this guy doesn't respect me and he doesn't respect what he's writing about. Yet we give that leeway to news programs like 60 Minutes with really important information about, more information on the nuclear war right after this message from Burger King.
Right.
And you're like,
how? It is funny. It is, dude.
Yeah.
It is.
So the book I gave it a 5 out of 5 review because it was just so...
But how do you tie that into, like, what's your main critique of those facts? Like, is that ultimately a horrible thing, right? That the news is kind of a show and like it doesn't really even matter what they're saying, because like Ellen DeGeneres has a joke about this where she's like, it's so hard for the anchors sometimes to change expression because they'll be like, and then a dog recently broke the Guinness Book of World Records for fastest lap around a track, and then a bus in Pakistan's exploded suicide bomber, and then there was another, like they're just kind of in and out of, like they're not really emotionally invested in anything. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of like bullshit coming at you and you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah,
because it's like Pakistan, this, that, home, nothing really actually even pertains to you. It's just there to fuel some kind of opinion or something, and this is where the conspiracies get started.
Well, yeah, because you're filled with so much information that you can do nothing about. So you're almost getting news about the news, and like you're just filling your brain with all these things, and you're distracted. There's new images every 3 seconds. There's a commercial. There's something about a puppy. Then there's something about the Holocaust, and like you're just constantly infiltrated. So you never have time to digest an idea and form an opinion on it and feel emotions for it and understand the nuance of it. So it's you know a lot of information, a wide array of things, but there's no depth to it at all. Just like the same with scrolling TikTok. You're getting a ton of information all the time, right? But you're never actually getting the depth of knowledge about it and sitting with it like you would with a book, like you would with listening to someone speak for an hour and a half.
One of my favorite albums of all time, top 10, seriously, it's called Amused to Death by Roger Waters.
Yeah, he references that. I think.
Really? So
in the foreword.
Awesome.
Well, no, in the foreword.
Right.
Because that Roger Waters album came out after the book, I believe.
Yeah, it came out in 89, I think.
Yeah, so the foreword's written by Neil Postman's son.
Yeah.
And he says, Roger Waters even named his album after
Yes, he did. Yeah. And there's a very poem like speaking over this ambient track called Perfect Sense Part 1. And if you'll allow me, just once, it won't take long. It says, the monkey sat on a pile of stone, and he stared at the broken bones in his hand, and strings of a Viennese quartet rang out across the land. And the monkey looked up at the stars, and he thought to himself, memory is a stranger, and history is for fools. And he cleaned his hands in a pool of holy writing, turned his back on the garden, and set out for the nearest town. And I always thought, it goes on, it gets way better.
First off, how the hell do you remember these things?
I could go on. You want me to keep going?
No.
I'll keep going. I'll keep going. Let me finish it. How about that? We got all day. No one's here. There's no producers. So, okay, the next line is, hold on, soldier. When you add it all up, the tears in the marrow bone, there's an ounce of gold and an ounce of pride in each ledger, and the Germans kill the Jews, and the Jews kill the Arabs, and the Arabs kill the hostages, and that is the news.
Wow.
And is it any wonder that the monkey's confused? He said, Mom, the president's a fool. Why do I have to keep reading these technical manuals? And the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the brokers on Wall Street said, don't make us laugh. You're a smart kid. Time is linear. Memory's a stranger. History's for fools. Man is a tool in the hands of the great God Almighty. And they gave him command of a nuclear submarine and sent him off in search of the Garden of Eden.
Damn.
Give you chills.
Holy shit.
Pink Floyd.
Wow.
And, Roger Waters. And yeah, that part of the album to me was always so like,
is he like singing that, or is that like a dialogue?
Well, the first part that I mentioned before I stopped, that's Roger Waters says that as if reading a poem. And then after that, boy, a big old black lady takes over on the mic, and she starts like soul giving it to you with soul in her voice. You know how they do.
What's the name of the song?
It's called Perfect Sense Part 1. But the thing is it's not like a radio-friendly jam, you know?
Definitely not.
It's an ambient kind of track, but it's a very deep thing. And Roger Waters has a connection to this kind of thing because his father was killed in World War II, and he grew up watching the war on TV and on Vietnam and all that. And there's an excerpt actually in the very beginning of the album where a kid is being interviewed, and he says, I don't mind about the war so much. I kind of like watching it, actually, because I don't know, which side's winning, if our side's losing, And it's like, dude, they say at the time, the footage on TV of Vietnam, you would see people get killed. And it was broadcasted on TV.
Wow.
And it was just like, and Roger Waters always associated that with like the beginning of this kind of like insatiable vicarious thirst for watching violence that exists now. This is why I watch people get their heads cut off.
Well, that's the
weekly.
What the parallel that Neil Postman makes in the book is that a lot of people put weight into 1984, the book by George Orwell. And people are always like, oh, the government's being Orwellian, right?
Yeah.
And the concept of that book, if you're not familiar, if you weren't required to read it in high school, is that a totalitarian government or something external will basically push your freedoms down from you. And you will be like shackled in a way where Big Brother is watching you and the government is stamping their foot on your neck, basically limiting your freedoms. What Neil Postman says that the television, and now if you play it out to social media, modern forms of media on the news, TikTok, all of these things, is it's less Orwellian 1984 and more Aldous Huxley Brave New World.
Right.
Which he predicted would be that not that the government would stamp down on us, but that we would be in a prison of our own making, where we actually aren't even aware we're in prison because we're filled with so much pleasure and dopamine and flooded with such a sea of information that, we're taking our opioids, we're drinking alcohol, we're smoking weed, we're gambling, we're having so much fun that we're not even aware that we put ourselves in our own prison.
Right.
And maybe that sounds like a ridiculous exaggeration when he wrote this book in 1984 about the TV.
Really.
But he depicts that is a more accurate, potential future for America, at least. He says 1984 did deem true in places like China or Russia. But America's version of totalitarianism is actually of our own doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I always thought Brave New World was it's more applicable to an American than Brave New World is, because Brave New World, 1984 is because, like you said, it's too on the nose or on the throat, if you will.
It's very obvious.
It's very oppressive. It's very obviously oppressive. Whereas Brave New World, there's this great part. I forget the character's name, but in that world, the culture has been manipulated to a point where if a girl refuses sex with a man, that's taboo.
Right.
Like, you're supposed to just give in. What are you, a prude? That was like calling someone a slut in Brave New World, calling someone a prude. And I remember there's this great like paragraph that the girl goes on and on because the main antagonist, or protagonist rather, is trying to figure out how he's going to get himself out of this obviously weird situation with the government and the cultural opinion. And she kind of like lists off the reason why he shouldn't do that. And the way Aldous Huxley wrote this, his writing, he said something like she cracked a smile and it just shook just a little bit because she's unsure. Right? She's unsure. She knows she's lying. She knows deep in her heart this isn't a genuine smile. And the protagonist, again, I forgot their names. I read it a long time ago, but he says like I almost like strangled her or something, but then I just kind of calmed down and let it go. Because like in that world too, like we all know that we're not doing what we should be doing. A lot of people, right? Like, but here we are scrolling away. Not going for the run. One of the
interesting concepts he made about this, which is a cool analogy that really struck home for me, was how it's a man-made thing. That's right. And he compares it to how man invented a clock, and we very easily forewent the sun and seasons in favor of seconds and minutes. Right. And it's like one of those things where we don't even notice that we're doing it, but we've basically constructed now how we consume time through the medium is the message, the clock is the medium.
Yes.
And the message is that everything we do must be measured in hours, seconds, minutes, months, weeks, days, calendars, as opposed to the way nature intended it to be. Right. And I thought that was a really interesting like analogy. And the other thing he said too was, in 1984 and in general, when people in America complain about totalitarianism or in some form, they talk about like the censorship or book banning, right? Burning books. And he said, that's not what we should worry about, really. What we should worry about is the fact that we are essentially burning information and making it so invaluable that it reduces our freedom, in the sense that we're filled with an information glut, that we don't have any freedom to decipher the truths from the lies because we're filled with so much information from social media. And I did a terrible job of just making that case, but that was really interesting, where he's like, you shouldn't be afraid of the obvious tyrannies. You should be afraid of the subtle tyrannies that are handed to you, basically.
So Satan. Let's get So I'm reading.
Yep, that's the name of this episode.
So I'm reading a book as well, and the book doesn't necessarily bring up Satan.
What's the name of the book?
It's called 180 Degrees: How to Unlearn Everything You Were Ever Taught. That's the name of the book. And the guy's name, Ferguson. I'll put it in the notes. Ferguson something. It's a weird name. Very unpopular book. Came out very recently. I haven't seen anyone talk about it. He hasn't been on a podcast. I just kind of Googled controversial books, and because I like that shit. And I didn't want books that had been banned. I wanted like books that whatever. It's not a popular book, but I don't know why, because I think it will be a popular book.
Was it written recently?
Yes, I think 2023 it came out. But you said just now that it's not that we have to worry about the obvious tyranny. It's the deceptive or the sneaky things. And, Satan...
Your boy.
Yeah. No, but yeah.
It's like the third time you brought up Satan on this podcast.
Well, because here's the thing. In these times, these divisive times, you do start to become more more conscious rather of good and evil, right? People I think that the polls say that the polls, that early 20-year-old men are more leaning conservative now and religious than they are leaning liberal, because it's like things are starting to switch as far as values and morals are concerned.
That's like the anarchy now.
Yeah,
it's like
the
going against the grain.
Religious and conservative, right? So, but the whole Satan thing is that, according to biblical theology, Satan was the most intelligent and deceptive creature in creation. That's what Satan is. He's the smartest and sneakiest thing that God's ever made. And Satan was rebellious in that when God created mankind, Satan refused to bow to it. He refused. And after that, God banished him from his kingdom, and then he created the real world, and then Lucifer he roamed the world, as they say, right? And it's in the book of Epoch, or book of Enoch, I believe it is. It's an ancient Hebrew religious apocalyptic text that talks about the origin of demons and why they do what they do.
Did you ever read the Bible?
I did. I mean, again, in parts, and never like full front to back.
Like as an adult.
Yeah, but I can quote like Isaiah 14:12 or something. Like I can do stuff.
I mean, you just quoted an entire song, so I'm not surprised.
Like my recall's pretty good. So anyway, so speaking of Satan, in this book 180 Degrees, given that that's the little pretext to Satan, 180 degrees is not just an angle, right? It's in this context, from this perspective, it's also an inversion, right? To look at things from an absolutely flipped perspective. Now, the obvious thing, just because it happened, I'm not going to talk about COVID particularly in that way, but like it's just the most recent example in that if you take the sentence of any narrative during that time, one of them being the COVID-19 mandates were put in place to control the virus. If you invert that sentence, do a 180 on it, right? You could say the virus was let out on purpose in order to put the COVID-19 mandates in place. And a lot of the things that were confusing at first about the mandates, you're going to lose your job if you don't get vaccinated, you can't go outside, you can't see your family, all of those things that people were like, what? If you take the second lens of it, the inverted text, it becomes quite obvious why they would want that. Because obviously, this is a plan. This was done on purpose, right? And the book talks about conspiracy theories in general. They bring up 9/11. They bring up Black Flag events from all through history, the Vietnam War. And all of these things that nowadays, by the way, people start to dig up certain things and go, hey, maybe this didn't happen the way they said it did, right? But the point is that, how hard is it really to believe, Kyle, that, people always talk about they, right? Mm-hmm. During COVID, it was always they. They want us to be oppressed. They want us to be unhealthy. They want to inject us with poison. Who are they? They are power-hungry sociopaths. That's who they are. And power-hungry sociopaths would never let anybody know who they really are. They would never let it become so obvious, you see, in a very satanic way. It would be sneaky, deceptive. And in the book, it's also quite smart in that, let me just finish that one last point. How hard is it to believe that there's just a cult of satanic people who want to run the world and control everybody? Is that really that hard to believe?
Yeah, and before because it sounds like you said, it almost sounds like who, like when you say satanic. But I think what you're getting
that's
at,
the problem.
Satanic makes it sound like, oh, this guy's a
religious
lark,
psycho.
yeah, and he's crazy. But if you replace satanic with just like
power-hungry sociopath,
with conspiring or malintended in some way, or out for their own sake,
right?
Then yes, that is totally probable.
Stories in the world.
So it sounds like the point of the book is basically not to say like for example, I know it was an example, but like not to say the COVID vaccine was let out to put mandates in place, but it's basically reframing how you look at different things.
Yeah.
And saying like when something odd is happening and it seems like a historical event, take a look at the opposite view. Not to say that that's correct, but to give yourself a different lens to which to see through it, that maybe what you're being told is not the truth.
Right. Well, if television is a show now, right?
Yeah.
It's all orchestrated like you're talking about in that book, then like why? I mean, orchestration needs a puppet master. It needs somebody to write the script. It needs somebody to write. And we all know, brought to you by Pfizer, all of that bullshit was, and I golfed with a guy who works for Pfizer the other day. They're not an evil company. I'm not saying they did anything wrong.
I work at Pfizer too.
Yeah, whatever. And like, that's great. And like, I'm not saying that like, it was all like this horrible thing, but it does help a little bit sometimes to kind of go, hold on, let me think outside the box for 1 second, just to consider other possibilities. You know what I mean? Because the world is let me just finish the point about the book though. He says, don't you kind of feel like there's all this talk about World War III right now? Like World War III might happen. His argument is that World War III began years ago. And the reason why we feel this confusion, because we don't know who to blame. We're not at war with China or Russia. It's not Russia versus Europe, really. It's like, Russia, Ukraine, they have a problem. Like there's the Israeli-Gaza thing. But like World War III is not really a thing right now, but we feel like there's this tension in the air. His argument is that it's already begun and that it's between people and government. That's World War III. Because he said the new
revolution.
Right. The new bullet is a syringe. I liked that.
Wow.
I was like, ooh. And he goes, the difference between a bullet and a syringe is a syringe, you have to comply. And so then it gets into psychological.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the opioid crisis,
right,
the COVID vaccines and all that.
You have to comply. We didn't do anything wrong. They said they wanted it, right? And, he talks about this book, I forget it, but it's literally called Psychological Warfare, and it was written like in the 70s, I think. And it's kind of like the Sun Tzu Art of War, but for psychological warfare. And there's all these like literal steps, right? And one of the steps is inconsistency when it comes to psychological warfare. Inconsistency, and I loved this because it was brilliant in that you would remember during COVID, everybody was like, 1 week we're supposed to wear a mask, the next week we're not supposed to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And now we're supposed to go outside and not go outside, and you should get double vaxxed, you shouldn't get vaxxed, whatever like the inconsistencies were. And it makes people think that our leaders are stupid, right? Everybody was like, Fauci's an idiot. Nancy Pelosi's an idiot. Biden's an idiot. Everyone's an idiot. But the reality is that if you're a mathematical person minded at all, and you just go to the law of probability, if it really was that the people who make the rules were stupid, that would mean that one of the things that they mandated would have eventually, through the laws of probability, worked out in favor of the people. But it never works out for the people. It's always in favor of them. It's always for them.
You see, this is why it's so important to read, people.
Yeah.
Because there are manipulative behaviors or maneuvers that people can elicit and have elicited in history. And here are the examples, X, Y, and Z. And we're always under this assumption that when you read history, terrible things happening or a government doing terrible things to its people, you're like, oh, well, that will never happen now, or that would never happen here.
Right.
And we always presume this stuff. But when you read books like that, and one of my favorite books is called Influence by Robert Cialdini, where he talks about the, again, psychological ways that people can manipulate you on a smaller scale, right? So like car salesmen or, your boss or like someone doing a business deal with you. But that's also been done by governments. It's been done by the Chinese Communist Party. It's been done by the Soviet Union. It's been being done by current Russia. And most likely it's being done by America, because if it's being done to us, why wouldn't we be doing it to them?
Why not?
And we're also being served propaganda. And again, that's one of those things that we don't like to admit. But if you look at the 1940s, you look at the 1960s, there's evidence of American propaganda to us. And nowadays, you could argue it seems like our political leaders are so stupidly transparent that it's just like, wow, they're so dumb. But there might actually be the case that, again, the they argument, which people think you're a conspiracy theorist when you start touting that. But it's just opening yourself by reading these books to the possibility that maybe they don't have the best intentions in mind.
And again, he didn't even bring this up at all. I just thought, well, how would you get people to follow orders and just say the script and not divert? Well, whatever happened to Jeffrey Epstein, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
like,
that's- I mean-
wouldn't it be through blackmail? I heard.
Shouldn't that be the biggest story ever?
Shouldn't that be the biggest thing that ever happened? And also, I remember, I forget what podcast it was, but they were talking about how Ronald Reagan, I don't know if this is true, dude, but like he apparently pulled someone to the side once and said, "Don't go to any private parties in Washington. Just don't do it." Because I know people who went to these parties and they were having a good time and there were, kids around, right? And then they woke up after blacking out with a Polaroid picture on their chest of them naked with a child. And now you have to do what we say. You have to.
Wow.
Or else we'll put this in the news.
I mean, what's the show with Kevin Spacey?
Yeah. I told this to my wife and she goes, "You've never seen House of Cards."
House of Cards, yeah.
You've never seen House
It's
of
literally
Cards?
House of Cards.
And I'm like, I can't watch that show.
Yeah.
Because I'll get too crazy with it. But I mean, like I'm just saying, Epstein, whatever happened to that guy? No one cares.
Yeah, and it's made me more, again, like the term conspiracy theorist has such a bad connotation to it now. But I think people in general now who have wisened up have just gotten a lot more skeptical and are less willing to believe a lot of the things that maybe in the 90s or the 80s that we were just willing to accept because it came from a source of power, it came from a source of truth. I think now we've just wisened up a little bit to maybe our government, not just government, but like mainstream media and the places that we've historically trusted.
Yeah.
aren't the most trustworthy institutions to be listening to. And I see it now. You see it with like a lot of like podcasters even. You can almost go down the ring of all of the prominent podcasters as they rise to a certain level of popularity, all of a sudden a hit piece comes out about them or someone tries to dig something up about them.
Yep.
And I was just listening to Chris Williamson, a guy we love.
No,
The Modern Wisdom podcast.
Yeah, I love him.
And Tim Ferriss was on and said to him, he's like, you're starting to reach that level.
Yep.
He's like,
He'll be there.
He's like, how is your private life being protected? Because you just saw Huberman, you just saw, Jay Shetty, Joe Rogan's gone through it. Like all of these guys.
Yeah, Chris
D'Elia. Well, that one might have been.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, but
I don't know anything about it, but I know we got in trouble.
You get all these hit pieces. And what's interesting now is that me and you, or the average people who listen to the Huberman podcast, who listen to Joe Rogan, when these hit pieces come out, all of us are just like, what? That's like, no, who cares? Like, that's not even true. Like,
right.
Or I don't even believe it. Even if it is true, I know that 80% of it is probably embellished, made up, or just like lacking complete context. But like, if you listen to Joe Rogan, if you listen to Huberman, if you listen to all these people that you trust, there's like hours and hours of evidence of who they are as a person and their character.
You can't be fake every day.
That you can't be fake.
For that long, you can't.
Yeah. So that's when you say, I think the best part about podcasts is it allows that level of transparency where we know the innate character of these people. Maybe we don't know about their personal lives, but that's okay. Whereas institutions like news corporations, the government, we don't have that level of visibility into who they are as a person, what their opinions are. Do they allow people to speak, and do they change their mind on things? Whereas when I listen to Rogan, I listen to Chris Williamson, I listen to Tim Ferriss, they might be wrong on a lot of things, but eventually they'll come around, admit their shortcomings.
And they're also the only people I've heard recently. Like I just started listening to Trigonometry because they've been having a lot of great guests on.
Yeah.
They're great. And like they're the only guys, along with the other guys that you just mentioned, who still have discussions with people that are so civil, even though they highly they definitely disagree on this issue, whatever they're talking about. There's still the civility of like, I apologize for interrupting, but let me just finish my point before you continue. Like that kind of like podcasters, it seems they try to demonize them, but they have more civility and they subscribe to logic and reason more than an average newscaster now. Like it's like insane.
Yeah,
you know?
and it goes. And what's beautiful, I would love to hear Neil Postman would say about podcasting, because I think that is, it's a new form that goes back to the oratory and the discussion based nature back in like the 1600s, right? Because
very unpredictable.
What's great about podcasts is, yes, there are ads and stuff, but you don't have that same 3-hour discussion with trigonometry guys and maybe someone they disagree with, and then all of a sudden they're like, and now let me bring this ad from Tide, and they're not cut off segments. There's no like music in between different things and like flashy images. It's just you're listening to a discussion, and it's up to you, the listener, to, decide what you think.
In the beginning of your last, the last thing you were talking about, the first thing you were talking about was kind of along the lines of, we always talk about this, free speech rights.
Yeah.
Like being able to say what you feel without, fear of being, censored. In the book, they do talk about 180 Degrees. Recently, a woman in England was just put in prison for 11 months for a Facebook post. And going back to the idea that World War III is a war between a people and their government, right? It's like, I thought England was a free country. A woman has been put in jail for not even saying something, but for putting something online that she said or typed or whatever. And if we're going to call that a war on free speech, that woman is a POW. Like, this is a war in a weird way, right? Like, they said that what she said could have incited violence. And it's like, okay, so you can go to jail for saying something that may have, but didn't, incite violence.
Right.
Like, what does that really mean? Like, you have a right to do that. It's free speech. But, like, the fact that a woman went to jail for that, Kyle, where are we?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Where are we?
And it's also, that's totally subjective to say may have caused violence. Like what I think may have caused violence.
She's a POW.
That's wild.
She's a POW. All right. So anyway, Satan and conspiracy theories and
heavy
World War
topics.
III and
let's get to some light stuff.
Okay.
Let's do a top 3 list.
That sounds great. Very refreshing.
So I think it's my turn.
Yeah,
after,
I think it is.
your top 3.
Yeah.
So my top 3 this week is going to be your top 3 pet peeves.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Top 3 pet peeves. Now, do you mean about specific individuals or like cultural things?
Whatever pisses you off a lot. Whatever grinds your gears.
Okay. I don't like how quickly new things that people say get adopted into people's speech, everyday speech.
Like slang terms?
Yeah. Like I heard a girl the other day, like just casually saying, like in a conversation with someone else, they were like talking about something, I guess, kind of humorous. And the girl was going, I'm dead. I'm dead. Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. And I'm like, you're dead, are you? You're dying.
That's a big one with the Gen Zers.
Like, can you just, first of all, you're 37. Like, you're not 19. Like, you can't just pick these things. You're not hip. You're not cool. You're not with it. I hate these fucking influencers, man. Dude, this is why I stand my ground. I never used to just adopt the term. Immediately, I would always wait till it was almost out. Yeah. And then I'd start kind of.
You gotta be a late adopter.
Sometimes. Mm-hmm. But for this girl, I'm dead. I'm dead. Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Oh, fuck you.
That's like, the one that I never could understand. Because a lot of times I'm a little bit more forgiving with some of the slang terms. If I like it, I'll use it. The one I could never get was hella.
Oh, God.
The West Coast.
Oh, God.
Like, this burrito's hella dope.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Fire's still around.
Fire's still
That's
a good
fire.
One. That's fire.
I'll say that now.
Mine is people who have the volume on their phone in public places.
Okay.
Hate it so much.
Well, what is it with blacks and doing that? Come on. Let's be real. This will or won't be in the episode, but 90% of the time it's a black person. And it's like
cannot confirm or deny.
It's the truth. And it's not like it's just a thing.
It's the FaceTime.
You go, why don't you have headphones?
Yeah.
They're $20.
And sometimes because if I were to FaceTime someone in public, and maybe I've done it before, but I'd
hang up immediately.
But I would, if I had to, let's say it was like a important call or just something funny that I needed to see, I would make it a point to be a little quiet and reserved. Yeah. It almost seems like the people who do this,
they're like, fuck you.
They are doing it on
the
purpose
phone.
And like purposely being loud enough to like annoy other people. And that's what really drives me nuts.
Right.
So I'm like, there's no...
I just feel like weird. I'm like, I don't want anyone to know what I'm listening to, or it's embarrassing, or I don't want anyone to know my business while I'm on the phone. Is it like like you want us to like hear what you're doing or hear what's going on? Like, or is it just like a general, just like, hey, just deal with it. I'll be out of here in a minute.
Or maybe they think it's totally normal. Maybe they do it all the time.
Yeah. Another pet peeve of mine is it's just the people who can't just get on the escalator.
Oh, this is
Like,
going to be one
why
of mine.
are you not? Why do you have to stop? Like, what do you think's going to happen?
Oh wait, no. Mine was going to be an elevator or a subway car. When people,
What do you mean about that?
When people don't let people out before they come
that's
in,
ridiculous.
That drives
People now though, they'll say, "Yo, what the fuck's wrong with you, bro? Move or don't move. Like, wait." You know
who ruins pet peeves for me is my wife. Who
she's like, well,
she's the most
maybe they didn't know.
She's the most lovely person on the planet.
She loves flowers, but like she is a flower.
And
she's like as delicate.
And I tell her, I'm like, you know what? Sometimes
As a daisy.
I just need you to be on my side, even if it doesn't make sense. Like if someone cuts me off in traffic, or if someone gets on the subway, and I'm like, hey, what the fuck? She's like, well, maybe that person's going to see, their grandma. And I'm like,
who cares?
Come on.
Yeah.
I was like, you're not even making it fun.
Don't be logical.
Yeah.
We're having an irrational
She makes
moment.
me feel bad about it. She's like, maybe they're going to a funeral and they need to rush. And I'm like, well, that's no fun.
Yeah.
She wouldn't be good in the pet peeve conversation.
No,
But-
she wouldn't. She'd be like, well, everyone's got their reasons. It's like, come on, Lauren. Yeah.
Wait, so what was yours going to be? The escalator?
Yeah, like people who have to stop before getting on. You're fucking weak. Just have a pair of like not even balls. Just what do you just the.
Yeah.
How weak are you? Why are you still alive? How could you be alive?
Or in New York when people stand on the left side of the escalator.
Get the fuck out of the way. Everyone knows that's the rush lane.
Even if
It's
you're
the fast lane.
Even if you're a tourist, to not have the sense of awareness to see that everyone is standing on the right and people are walking on the left.
Oh no, tourists is just a general pet peeve.
Yeah.
They don't know what the hell's going on in this city.
I'll give you one of mine, which we talked about in the last episode, but people being late. I
hate that.
Can't forgive it. It's the thing that if you do it once, I forgive you. If you do it twice, I'm like,
what
all
goes
right.
through your head though? Like, what are you like when it happens to you? Like you're sitting there.
It's not people being late. It's people who are chronically late.
Yeah.
Like the one friend that is just always 30 minutes
just
late.
can't be on time.
It's the people who are just chronically late their whole lives. I'm just like, how have you not realized to just leave a little bit earlier?
Right.
I don't get it.
Because then you start to think, is this on purpose?
Yeah.
Like,
Because
why
I'm
are
like,
you disrespecting me?
Yeah.
You know?
Or do you just enjoy being in a rush too?
Right.
Because when I'm in a rush, I hate that feeling of like my heart's racing. I'm like speeding in the car, and I hate that feeling.
You know, it gets to me, man. I get so mad about that I start to get really deep with the thought of like maybe they're like really actually like communist Marxist, like fuck the system. Dude, just get here at 7:30, please.
Yeah,
please.
That's probably my biggest pet peeve by far.
I don't like that. I'm
chronically
really,
late people.
I don't like
get
that.
it.
I don't like that at all.
Just set your watch to like 10 minutes earlier.
But yeah, the 808 hi-hat on the train when you get on, it's like, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I gotta hear
It's
this
always
for an
that.
hour?
It's always
for
that.
an hour. I gotta hear that.
It's always that song, whatever that song is.
You know.
It's just
What was my first one? Oh, people
slang.
adopting slang too quickly.
Yeah.
Can you fucking... Well, white people ruin everything. That's the problem. We take what's cool to say, adopt it, and now it's like we just kill it. I hate white people, man. I really do. I really can't stand them. I posted something the other day. Fucking Kathy Hochul. You heard what she said? She goes, there are kids in the Bronx who don't know what a computer is. They don't know. White people are so like white people like her are so detached.
Oh god,
she's so out of it, living in wherever the fuck she lives upstate. Dude, and then at the thing I posted, there was like this black kid from the Bronx or wherever he's from. He was acting like a monkey and like pushing a laptop and like afraid of it. Dude, it was so funny. The kid deserves to be on the news. It was that funny. It was so funny.
All right, so let's end it with what? A book, a podcast, and a show that you recommend.
Sure. A book, a podcast, and a show. Well, the book I'd recommend is honestly the one I'm reading, 180 Degrees, because it's not popular. And it should be, just to get people who are just very like vanilla. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Just fucking think outside the box for once in your fucking life, please.
Okay. Podcast and a show.
Sorry. Podcast I'd recommend. Dude, you know who's been hilarious lately? Chris DiStefano.
Oh my God.
His
Did you see him on
podcast-
Rogan?
Dude, so the guy's got mental
That
problems.
was insane.
He's talking about how he sold his house because he couldn't deal with the anxiety of having a big show. Uplifted his whole family, uprooted his whole family. Kids have friends. Fuck you, don't care. Brought them to Queens. They're all going, Dad, I miss my friends. I miss my yard. Whatever. The guy's a mental patient.
There was a clip of Rogan and Jamie after that episode, because it was like it was basically a 3-hour therapy session.
Yeah.
And Chris DiStefano said after the episode, they both took off their headphones and were just like, whoa.
Dude, because he's out of his mind.
He is.
That
was
crazy.
insane.
But his show, Chrissy Chaos,
Yeah.
funny.
I used to love
Very
when
funny.
him and Yanni Pappas did
Yeah.
History Hyenas. That was one of my favorite podcasts.
yeah,
That
I'd
was so
recommend
good.
Chrissy Chaos. Chris DiStefano is fucking hilarious.
He's great.
Man. He really
I
is.
saw him. Like back in October. at
You know what's
Paramount?
funny? He brought up one of the stories about doing something for the owner of the Mets. I think that was at the Paramount. that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So funny. I'd recommend a book. Podcast and show. Can I recommend music instead of a show?
Sure, yeah.
Because I don't watch shows.
Yeah, neither do I.
You know what I
really,
mean?
Actually.
I'll tell you this. Motley Crue came out with a new song called Dogs of War.
They're still together?
You know, this is what they do, right? They go on they do a final tour. They do like a farewell tour every few years. And then they just keep going. Just keep making music, keep doing the whole thing. If you're into Motley Crue-esque kind of music, surprisingly heavy, surprisingly enjoyable. Not the greatest. Why is this falling? Not the greatest Motley Crue song in the world, but honestly, you go, fuck.
Good.
This is really fucking heavy. Really good. Motley Crue, 180 Degrees, Chris DiStefano's podcast.
Okay, beautiful. Book I'd recommend is one that I read a while ago. It's one of my first recommendations on Observe and Rapport Instagram. Is called Exhalations by Ted Chiang. So it's actually it's a series of short stories, and it's like really sci-fi, cool fiction short stories.
I love that shit.
And the premise of the movie Arrival was based on one of his short stories, and it's in that book, Exhalations. I might reread it because Tim Ferriss brought it up recently on the Chris Williamson podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how good that.
He
book
brought up
was.
a lot of cool books.
Yeah. Podcasts I'd recommend. I've been listening a lot to Diary of a CEO by Stephen Bartlett. You probably see the clips all the time. He's like a black guy with a British accent, and usually the other person is like crying as a guest. Like it's either like Russell Brand or like right? So
yeah. And he asked them like really serious deep questions.
Yeah, so he's really good. He has a lot of good guests, and he asks good questions and like gets very emotional with them. So that's a good podcast that I've been listening to recently. Show again, I don't really watch too many shows, so I'm gonna have to edit
Recommend
this
some
segment.
music. Shows are so much now.
Music, I'll go with the basic one. Speaking of white people, music. Post Malone, Morgan Wallen.
Oh, dude, what a banger!
I had some help.
I
Great
listened on before cooking dinner, cleaning dinner up. Me and the baby were dancing.
I
to it
love
in the
that
kitchen,
song.
dude.
I love both of them.
I had some help.
Yeah.
Don't act like you ain't help me get this bottle off the shelf. Come on,
That's so
dude.
good. Dude, I like.
What I mean, are we just gonna have a summer?
Yeah.
No bullshit.
Why not? I love it.
right.
Like I have some friends that don't like country music.
They're wrong.
And
They're wrong.
I don't listen to country music from like November to April, and then as soon as it gets above like 70 degrees,
That's
it just sounds so much better.
Dude, you turn on Beer Never Broke My Heart.
Oh,
Luke
my
Combs.
God, yeah.
See you tomorrow.
Luke Combs was my #1 artist on Spotify last year. I didn't even think I listened to him that much. I was like,
#1.
whoa.
No, that was my wife's #1.
Yeah, that music when the sun's out and you're like day drinking, there's nothing better.
Nothing better. It's the modern day Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yes.
It's just fucking perfect.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the song's about. It's
No.
just the vibe. It's great.
No. It's, dude, Morgan Wallen, man. Everyone's heard it by now, I assume anyway. But what a jam.
Yeah.
I had some help.
Post Malone is quickly becoming one of my favorite
You know,
artists.
he has a song off Yours Truly. It's called it's called Yours Truly, off of Stoney, I believe. And man, the vibe of that, and it makes me wish I did pills, you know, just to get that. Like you can tell he's on drugs.
Yeah.
And like you're just like, it's such a chill, fucking laid back song.
Like a Pink Floyd album.
Yeah, and like it's almost like it's just about, give me the money, you know who it belongs to, and I'm on pills, and I just got down from the high of my life, and it's such a vibe, and he nails it every time. Posty, love Post Malone.
And he's my
crush. He's my man crush.
He started as rap, then he went to like R&B, then pop. Now he's crossing to like country. He's so versatile, and he plays guitar. He like shreds on guitar.
Years. God bless him.
He's so talented.
By the way, I've talked shit about Taylor Swift. Watched her fucking live concert. She's fantastic.
She's amazing.
You know what I mean?
Amazing. I don't get
like,
the haters are very
talk
dumb.
shit, but she's fucking great.
The haters are dumb.
What's that song, dude? Where she goes, she's like, you need to chill out. Just fucking calm down. You know that song?
Like all of them? I don't know.
Like, everyone knows what I'm talking about right
yes.
now. But
all the Swifties who also listen to us. I don't think there's a lot of overlap.
I was like,
yeah.
Yo, that song is incredible, bro.
That's what I say.
Down.
Because I'm like, I don't listen to Taylor Swift just like, casually.
Yeah.
But if I'm a few drinks in at a wedding or something, her music's awesome.
She's fucking great.
So I said this to my coworkers because they were having like a debate. They're like, oh, she's no Beyonce or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what your opinion is if you listen to her or not. Right now, it's like saying you don't like the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's just like,
that's what I realize.
It's like, I don't care if you don't listen to the Beatles if it's not your taste. It's objectively like the best music by statistics, by everything. So like,
go ahead, be the outlier.
Yeah, you can hate it.
Good
it's like,
you.
sure, you're the contrarian, but like, yeah, I don't know. She's too talented
she's fucking awesome.
To bash.
Those songs are incredible. You can't say they're not. All right,
Swifties.
Boy, what a fucking app.
Satan, black people, white people, Swifties.
We got into it all. Conspiracy theories.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to get on this podcast, so keep on listening. We might go even further.
We try to change it up. All right, boy. Kyle. Sorry. I was going to say.
All right, boys and girls.
I was going to say boys and girls. All right. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.